I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the view of Wolfpack Research or any of its officers. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. We are not investment advisors. We hold no registrations with the SEC, FINRA, or any other regulatory agency, and none of the opinions expressed on this podcast should be considered investment advice. The listener should assume that we have positions in and stand to benefit from any stock or other security mentioned on this podcast. Do your own research before making investment decisions.
Welcome to the Wolf Den, everybody. This is Dan David coming back at you. Today we have Sound Carl.
That's right.
Even better, Sound Andrew.
Not Sound Andrew.
Yeah. Okay. Our show today, we have Winston Sterzel, otherwise known as Serpent ZA. We've got to get to the bottom of that.
Well, he's in England, so it's Z.
Oh, is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it is ZA, but ZA is fine.
ZA.
Z.
Yeah.
It's like they, instead of saying zero, they go nil.
No, yeah, and aluminium.
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 That's what it is. It's aluminium.
Well, no, it's actually aluminum. So,
no. Anyway, we can discuss that later.
All right. Winston is a South African vlogger and video producer. He lived in Shenzhen in Guangdong province. Forget this, over 14 years. Yike. A long time. Saw a lot happen there. He's born and raised in South Africa. He moved to China to work as an English teacher, as one does, after visiting on business in 2005. Started uploading videos in China in 2007. Became a full-time vlogger in 2016. His videos have over 178 million views and primarily focus on life in China as viewed from a Western perspective.
That's a lot of views.
That's a lot of views. With fellow YouTuber Matt Tye, who goes by the way Laoway86, we had him on our show, has taken extraordinary journeys to produce the documentary series Conquering Southern China, Conquering Northern China. We'll get into that a little bit. Matt talked about it and it sounded pretty harrowing. Mm-hmm. He and Tye operate the YouTube channel ADVChina, a motorcycle travel vlog. Sterzel was also the co-founder of a small China-based custom motorcycle business before I'm sure they stole it from him.
Yeah.
In 2019, Sterzel moved to Los Angeles following threats by ultranationals and the Chinese government who accused Sterzel's wife of being a spy and a threat to national security.
Nice.
Yikes. Whoa. Well, first of all, welcome to the show, Winston.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I have to ask you first question after reading that last sentence. How was that conversation with your wife when you're just like, yeah, hey, why didn't you tell me you were a spy?
Well, the way it actually went down is my wife got called into a disciplinary hearing at her hospital. She was a doctor in China. And, they've got, and the way it operates is you have your medical board, then you have a couple of large hospitals, and then underneath those hospitals, you have clinics. Okay, So she was in one of the clinics, which is it was attached to a certain hospital.
And she was a Chinese national?
Yeah, she's a Chinese national.
Oh, okay. So that made it much more serious, the accusation.
Yeah, it was crazy. So, she got called into this disciplinary hearing by sort of the medical board. But the reason she found out about this is one of her friends, of course, was working in the higher up. And they said, look, we've received this, this letter or this complaint or whatever it was. And it was an official document. They'd been bombarded with letters about her being a traitor because she was married to me by the haters. And this is something they do often. They go and they'll raid comment sections and leave nasty comments and things, but they will try their absolute best to disrupt a person's family and so on in order to try and shut them down, in order to silence them. So they went after my wife in a big way. They reported her to the medical board. They reported her to the Public Security Bureau. They reported her to the local police. They started to spam phone call and send messages and emails to her boss because, all the information about doctors and so on is quite public in China. It's pretty easy to figure out where they work and, because their names are up there on the roster and so on. So her hospital and her clinic and everything were being bombarded by these phone calls and emails and text messages and whatever else. But they received it was like a 24-page document about why she's a traitor It had screenshots of her and me together. It had screenshots of, my videos and so on and so forth. And the whole thing was it was actually quite a joke, because if you read through it, there were so many mistakes in this document that they'd written up. But the fact of the matter is it got elevated to the highest level, and she actually got called in for like a disciplinary hearing. And the end goal of these guys was to get her fired, number one. Number two, get her imprisoned for being like a national security threat or whatever. And their absolute end goal was to silence me, to make me stop making videos. And this is back when I wasn't even very critical of.
Yeah, they're pretty innocuous videos, right? I mean, you're conquering southern China and northern China. You made friends with everybody everywhere you went. I saw those; they were great. You guys were milking horses and doing all, whatever, riding llamas. Yeah. It didn't seem like. I mean, what were they so pissed off about?
Here's the weird thing: is that in China, the opinion of a foreigner is elevated above the opinion of a Chinese person. That's why you see these guys doing these what we call white monkey jobs, where they'll hire a white face to be, the face of a brand, for instance. Or if they're having a big, important meeting, they'll hire some foreigners to just come and sit there to make it look like the company has international connections and so on. But if a foreigner endorses something in China, like say, for instance, if a foreigner goes and is in an advert and drinks a drink and says, wow, this drink is really delicious, this Chinese drink, then everybody will be like, oh, that must be a very good drink because even foreigners like it. Because for the longest time in China, foreign imported goods and so on have been of much higher quality than local Chinese brands.
Right.
Okay, that's just how it's been.
Right.
So the opinions of foreigners mean a lot, but there's a reverse to that. If a foreigner has an opinion that's negative towards China in any way, shape, or form, there's like a defense mechanism that kicks in, that suddenly that foreigner must be a traitor and he's here to attack us and smear China, make China look bad, all that kind of thing. So the reason they started to do this is I started to criticize certain aspects of China's society. I was smart enough to know that I should not criticize the government, go down that path. Don't discuss politics or religion. That's usually what you stay away from.
Mostly politics.
Yeah.
There is no religion there.
No, there is no religion in China. I made a couple of videos where I was criticizing legitimate things like the kidnapping issue in China, right? Because I knew people who were victims of kidnapping, and I'd actually helped stop a child trafficking ring on the subway there in Shenzhen, where what was happening was I noticed beggars are not allowed on the subway, right? There's signs everywhere, no begging, etc. But you get these women and they'd come in and they'd have like an overcoat on and they'd sit there and then they'd take the overcoat off and have really tatty clothes underneath. They'd have a child strapped to their back and they'd walk around asking for money, right? So I saw this one day and I noticed the child's like 2 years old, thereabouts, but completely silent and just groggy and kind of like rolling its eyes around, definitely drugged. So I'm like, this isn't okay. Then the next day I was traveling on the same route. I saw a different woman doing the same trick, but with the same child on her back. Oh. I was like, this is bullshit. They're definitely, what they're doing here is they're, passing this kid around to different people as a prop, for their sympathy ploy to get money from people. So I started to take photos of them. And the third day, there was a different woman with the same kid. And I actually physically took a hold of her and pulled her off the train and called the security guards, got the police involved, gave them the photos that I'd taken of the previous two women with the same kid. And they took her away and they actually put up notices at the subway after that said, like, if you see these kind of, beggars, don't give them money type thing. So I actually got involved in, taking down a little bit of this child trafficking kind of thing that's going on. Because this is what happens. They'll either rent the children from poor families or they just buy them or, they kidnap them. One of these three. Anyway, so I got really pissed off and I started to make videos criticizing these aspects of Chinese society. And I honestly thought that the Chinese people would be on my side, because the whole point of me exposing this stuff and trying to do something about it is I wanted it to change. Those aspects of Chinese society which are terrible, they need to be pointed out so they can be changed. And that's what Westerners normally do, is we complain about something that we don't like and then things get done, right? We start to talk about it. We start to get things involved. We start campaigns.
You mean over in Western countries?
Yeah, exactly. But not in China.
Well,
Suddenly there's a foreigner pointing out the flaws in your society. He's the enemy.
that's quite a flaw.
And that's what happened, was because I was pointing out things like that and like food safety issues and so on and so forth that I was coming across. I became enemy number one. Now, and I wasn't even like attacking the government. I wasn't attacking politics. I was actually doing this on behalf of the Chinese people. Hey, let's fix this. You know, I'm here to help you. Let's bring awareness. Let's try to fix this. The result was they went after my wife to try and silence me. It was pretty scary. A dude turned up at her work once, luckily not in her clinic. This is when they were still trying to find out who she was. Turned up in her like head office, the big hospital, in the HR department, with a picture they printed out of my wife and me together off the internet. And they were asking around, like, does she work here? Where is she? Et cetera, et cetera. And he was taking photos and videos of the building. And luckily, the security guard eventually made him delete all his stuff off his phone and kicked him out. But, you know, it was starting to get to a very dangerous point. And it was really just at that point where we knew it was time to get out,
The Chinese version of canceling someone is pretty serious.
I want to get back to, first of all, what you did.
Props, yeah.
Great job. Phenomenal. And something, you can always feel good about in your life when you've, had a bad day.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. But then you call the police, you bring them out, and the police are like, okay, and we're going to take care of this. We're going to put up a sign that says, don't give them money. Not that if you see a kid in distress,
help the kid.
Help the kid.
Yeah.
I mean, what the
that's
hell?
true.
That's just, it's hard to wrap your head around it, but I've heard too many stories that are too similar. And then also what you unwrap from that too is like, this guy that's, dogging your wife at the hospital gets rolled up by a security guard, and the security guard makes him delete videos. I mean, here in the United States, security guard says whatever. We're just like, hey, stick it up your ass. I'm not deleting any videos. Yeah. But they have some power there, right? You kind of do what that authority says in China.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, low-level security guards aren't treated with any respect. But, if you're dealing with, like, for instance, the security guard inside the hospital will have a little bit more authority. Huh. And the actual police as well. It's such a weird situation. Cops are treated like dirt, and usually you can get away with it until a certain point. If they decide, okay, that's it, now we're going to throw the book at you, they have the power to do anything. Right. That's the difference.
And you do mean anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, they can throw the jail on top of you.
Oh, yeah, and there's no repercussions for the police either. So, if they decide they don't like you, they'll just take you and detain you. And even if it's a false detainment and whatever you get out of it eventually, that cop, nothing will happen to them. It's very different. There's no accountability like you find in the States, for instance.
I definitely do know that. We've had our, some of our security specialists, some of our investigators rolled up. And it's been the gamut. Like, some have spent time in prison, which was a very sad, costly thing. And it's not just the money part of it, but the human cost of it. Yeah. And then other times, security at a company that we're surveilling kind of find out who he's working for. And they're like, oh, no. You go back and tell them we're a good company. We have your ID. Yeah. And we know where you live. Sure. So your report back to Dan is that we're doing everything we say we're doing, or we'll come visit you.
Yeah, they do that a lot. The ID card is a massive form of control. I had a friend, well, I should say an acquaintance in China, a Chinese guy who made some bad debts gambling. Okay, and gambling, of course, is illegal in China, but it's everywhere.
Especially in Macau.
Yeah. Well, just go to Macau, yeah. But what happened was the mafia thugs basically took him into a room, sat him down, and they took photocopies of his ID card, like said, and they said, we know everything about you. You right. Pay back this debt, otherwise you're toast. And your family's toast, because the ID card ties you to everything.
It does. It ties you back to where you were born, and if you have a little more than that, you can actually get travel records.
Oh, dude,
past and future.
The new generation ID cards. I remember when they brought out the 5th generation ones. It's a smart card. You scan it on a scanner.
Now
it's got every piece of information about you.
Yeah.
Your educational history, your travel history, or social credit score, so to speak. So every single piece of information about you is in there. But nowadays, with the zero COVID monitoring system, they don't even need that anymore. They know where everyone is at all times anyway.
Man, what a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't so depressing, it would be impressive. Just flat out impressive. Where they came from back when you first started going to China, which is, they didn't even use credit cards. They skipped credit cards, right? They went right from cash to buying things with their phone.
Yeah, the mobile.
Right. So they just move at light speed that way. Now it's just become a total surveillance state. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they skipped VHS too.
They're not missing much.
No, they went straight to VCD. So I think
Beta
they kind of
was
did
always
miss a little
better,
bit.
damn it.
That's the thing, though. China just didn't have the infrastructure, and they weren't equipped with the technology to handle certain things that were available in the West, for instance. You know, you couldn't buy a VCR in China during the 80s. Remember, it was still a very oppressive place.
Right.
By the time the 90s rolled around and people started to have a little bit of disposable income, VHS was kind of too much of an investment. So they'd be getting pirated VCDs and that sort of thing. VCD players were the thing. So, you know, that's the same with credit cards. They didn't have the infrastructure for credit cards, so they never took off. You can get a credit card in China, but good luck using it anywhere.
Right.
You know, I remember just everywhere I used to go before WeChat Pay became, or Alipay and Zhifubao became a big thing, you would have to just use cash for everything. That's just the way it worked, you know?
And that's we're talking mid to late 2000s.
Oh, yeah, dude. Like, when I left China, I was still one of those guys who preferred to use cash.
Right. Because you didn't want to be, I mean, you're already being tracked. You didn't want to make it that much easier.
It's also just, I don't know, man, like, as much as people trust WeChat or whatever, I don't like the idea that you're getting people, like random people, to scan your QR code and it's going to somehow make sure they don't extract more money than they say or whatever. You know, it's hard to tell because it got to a point where beggars are using QR code in order to
That is fantastic.
You know, get a donation. It's like everyone's using these QR codes and you go to some really like ratty little shop somewhere in the middle of nowhere when you're doing a little trip or something. And there's a really dodgy guy there who wants to scan your code. It's linked to your bank account. No, thank you very much. So, you know, I'm rather just like avoided that. I set up a different bank account only just for WeChat and only had a couple hundred RMB in it, you know. So if I had to use it, it's not a big deal.
That was smart. Did Matt ever get taken from that, or did he ever have a problem with that? Because you guys traveled together.
No, I don't think so. You know, when you have a new technology like that coming out from an IT background, I'm very skeptical. But the reason why this kind of technology flourishes in China is that nobody in China thinks about that side of things. It's not very security minded when it comes to computers and technology. And in fact, the biggest thing is that in China, no one protests about their privacy being invaded. So, you know, when you install WeChat on your phone and it's asking for full access to your camera, your bank account, your microphone, your location, and all that kind of nonsense, everyone just says yes. You know, there's nobody out there who's like, I don't want my privacy invaded. Everyone's just like, yes, it makes my life easier. Yes, 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 yes. You can have...
Because their privacy's already been like shattered. Yeah, I mean, they have no privacy.
And so that's why you see these advancements in that sort of technology in China, is because if you try to roll that kind of thing out in a Western country, there'd be so much pushback that in order to develop the technology and work out the bugs, you'd take years and years and years because you need people to consent, and then you can start to test things, and then you can see what works, what doesn't. In China, they just roll stuff out. Everyone's like, yes, it fails. They don't care. They've learned from their mistakes and move on. So that's why that side of technology grows very quickly in China.
They're like a cornerback for the Detroit Lions.
Everything gets by.
Yeah, I mean, if it fails, you just, get right back to it and let somebody score a touchdown on you again. That's the way it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
The societal differences, I mean, some of your videos, and I've got to say props to you guys. You really do a great job. And you talk about some of the most interesting things, like, why aren't there birds in China?
Yeah.
Why aren't there birds in China?
Well, we know birds aren't real.
Well, that's here.
Well, they've been eaten.
And that's actually true. Those birds are robots, and they're recharging when they're sitting on the telephone lines. There you go. Because they've been eaten. That's the simplest answer, right?
They have been eaten. I mean, look, you have to understand that it's not that long ago, we're talking about 50s, 60s, thereabouts, it's like they had their great famine where...
You eat what you kill.
Everyone was starving, you got tens of millions of people starving to death. You're going to eat what you can eat.
Right.
And birds are edible.
Yeah.
And they ate the bark of the trees. They ate everything. They ate all the insects. They ate all of the little critters. Any single thing they could get their hands on. Birds too. And he also destroyed the natural habitats of birds. They cut down all the trees in order to burn in those stupid furnaces to try and make steel, because Mao Zedong said everyone has to make steel to, outpace the Soviet Union. So they cut down all the natural habitats for the birds. They ate all the birds. Mao Zedong even had this massive campaign to kill all the sparrows, in which they did. And then they ended up killing all the sparrows, and then there was nothing to eat the locusts, and the locusts ate all their crops. And so they had to import sparrows from the Soviet Union.
And start eating locusts.
Yeah, exactly. That's ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous mess. But basically, all the birds have been eaten. And that's not even a joke. That's just what happened. And all their natural habitats were destroyed. Now, of course, they're trying to reverse this. But it's a slow process, It's a slow process for nature to kind of come back, especially if you've destroyed the migratory, habitats where the birds used to go and so on. So there really are no birds in China.
Birds are migratory, right? And I guess... over generations, they're just like, screw this place.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's nothing there for them. What are you going to go land and eat a patch of dirt, or concrete? That's the problem, And of course, like China's changed a lot over the last couple of decades, but that kind of damage takes a very long time to heal. And so that's why you don't see many birds in China. And the problem is people still catch and eat the birds anyway.
Still food.
Now.
Right.
So like I used to go riding a dirt bike out in the woods type area, which there was this logging area I used to go to because, they plant trees. And when you see trees in China around the cities and stuff, it's not natural. It's been planted, right? So I used to go to this planted area in Guangdong, and I'd very often get snarled up in bird nets because they'd set up bird nets in between the trees everywhere. So I'd be riding up, go around a corner, and all of a sudden there I'm stuck in a bird net,
Oh my God.
So they're still just catching the birds, so...
Yeah, I guess that's how one would catch all the birds, right? You'd set up like fishing nets, bird nets.
Yeah, just bird nets. Yeah, man. They string them between the trees, and like anything that flies through gets snared in there,
And then they just kill it and eat it.
Yeah. And in China, certain birds are used in traditional medicine, et cetera, but mostly just eat it.
I guess that's where the bird flu, maybe.
Got avian flu.
The whole SARS bird flu thing came just from very unhygienic situations.
Outdoor markets, things of that nature, still prevalent.
China is the first country to domesticate geese and sort of live together with birds, right? So, that is where you get this like bird to human transmission thing, is because you got, tons of birds and people living with the birds, either in the same house or they're working with the birds all the time. So, that's why we see these things happening throughout history, actually coming from China.
What was the benefit of domesticating geese? Just for livestock?
I think so, yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll be riding in the rural countryside, you'll come across like a herd of geese in someone's backyard, and then they'll like run after you, try to attack you. So I guess it's kind of like a guard dog / livestock.
Yeah, they can be brutal.
King duck is pretty tasty.
So, given your experience with China and understanding their government as well, what are the chances, do you think, that they invade Taiwan? Is it 99% or 100?
That's the problem. They're at a point, they've known for the longest time, the government, that if they did that, it would be a massive mistake. All right. So the level-headed people that are still inside the CCP are always trying to avoid that situation, but they bluster about it, and they use it as a political tool to kind of, get the entire nation riled up together, in solidarity, and like, we're going to take back Taiwan, we're going to reunify China, all that kind of crap. They bring that out every time there's some kind of a downturn in opinion towards the government, right? They just throw that out there, or they throw out something anti-Japanese or whatever. But Xi Jinping, he's a bit of a different story.
He really is. I believe him. I think he's going to do it.
He might, and that's the thing. Like, he might, out of desperation, just have to do it when his the opinion of him has gone too low. That's like his trump card up his sleeve. His ace up his sleeve. He'll be like, okay, well, let's just invade Taiwan. So,
as we sit here, he's about to start his third term, right?
Yeah, he is. And that's why the zero COVID policy thing is just outrageously ridiculous right now. It's because it's his brainchild. He doesn't want to let it go.
Why are people putting up with it? I mean, other than the obvious answers, because they don't like bullets to the head. I mean, why? Come
on. You had that massive earthquake in Sichuan just an 2 weeks ago or so, 6.8 on the Richter scale. People locked in their buildings because of zero COVID. They couldn't get out of their buildings during an earthquake.
Well, now they're there for good.
Many of them are. And the rescue workers going in to rescue people from the rubble all have to line up and get COVID tests before they're allowed to go rescue people, God. And 24 hours wait for their results and stuff. It's the stupidest thing in the world. It's just reached levels of absurdity that no one could ever imagine, where they're testing stones for COVID. They're testing every animal. They're testing fish, which don't even have lungs, right? They're testing fish for COVID. They're testing every single thing you can think of.
I guess a whale.
For COVID. They're spraying disinfectant in every place possible on the runway, for goodness sake, at an airport. What's that going to help, It's madness. It's madness, but they have to do it now because they've told that they have to do it,
Well, what happened to the part of the conversation where they do something, it doesn't work, and they just fix it and move on? I think this falls under that kind of this just doesn't work. COVID's going to run through your country, period. It ran through ours. It wasn't good, but, we got through it.
They don't have to. You know why? Because they don't let people have that conversation. It's simple. As far as everyone's concerned in China, the only way to deal with COVID is the Chinese way, because that's all they've been told, is the way that the CCP is dealing with it is the best way. They're also not told about the deaths and the infections and the problems that China has faced. Who in their right mind is going to believe the amount of deaths that from COVID that China reported? It's like some stupidly small amount.
Less than Iceland.
Well, I mean, when the first thing first started, we still had more boots on the ground than I would say today.
Yeah.
And people in Wuhan. And they're stacking up urns outside of crematoriums because they don't fit inside anymore. There were a lot of people dying. And the other part of this, though, is with China, and I know this is going to sound horrible, statistics matter.
Yes.
They have an aging population, and COVID is a solution. It does help them in a way. Are they taking advantage of that in some way, or?
I mean, look, that's an interesting take, and it's entirely possible that they've thought about that. But I think the whole COVID situation is more about them finally getting that ultimate control over the populace that they've been seeking all this time.
Yeah, that probably makes
it's
more sense.
Such a convenient excuse for them to be able to know exactly where everyone is and to control the movement of people. And they've been able to do this now because, if a certain area is in lockdown, you're not allowed to leave. If a certain city has an infection, you're not allowed to go there. If you're planning to go do a protest because your life savings was stolen by a bank, suddenly your QR code turns red and you're not allowed to go out your door, not allowed to get on a bus or a train or whatever.
There's been a COVID outbreak or not.
Yeah, they did that.
Wow.
They did that. There was that huge bank protest where the small banks in Henan were stealing they stole everyone's life savings and ran away. And so they planned to go and protest. And so the local government just made all of those people that were going to plan to protest, made their QR codes red, so they couldn't go to the protest, right? So they're already using it. And they admitted this, by the way. It's not like it's a hidden secret. They actually did. Then they kind of had to roll it back. But the fact of the matter is it was used once very effectively to stop a protest. So it can be used for anything.
Right.
If somebody's a troublemaker, someone, speaking out or something, just change their QR code to red. They won't be able to leave their apartment. They won't be able to go into a supermarket. They won't be able to get on a bus or a train or a plane. You've effectively locked them in prison without having to do any of the hard work.
That's insane.
That's one of the reasons they're never going to stop this, They're going to keep this going.
This made a lot more sense to me in the universe of the 80s and the 90s, where there were just many less Chinese nationals traveling.
Right.
And now with as much international business as there is, I would think some of the freedoms, you couldn't have been more wrong than Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
In opening up China and saying, good luck controlling the internet. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah.
Sure.
And they did. But it seems like, once this gets so oppressive, some hope is coming back into the country from Western visitors. Is it not having an effect at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, you're not getting that many people going back. You know that it costs something like $20,000 for a plane ticket to go to China right now?
No, I would not know that because I, obviously cannot go to China.
Sure. Well, neither can I, but look it up. If you want to book a plane ticket right now to China, it's going to cost you the cheapest tickets are like $8,000 to $10,000 for like I don't know, where you have to stop over 5 times and spend like a week in a plane. And if you want to get there with only a single stopover, it's costing you like $20,000 US. So people are not just flying to China for no reason right now. Okay. It's only people that really, really need to be there for family reasons or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to get into China right now. They're not just handing out. Yeah, super difficult to get out too. So you're not getting a lot of this cross-border stuff. You know, they're not getting a lot of people.
But we were 3 or 4 years ago and 5 years ago.
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely.
Xi Jinping has been in power now 10 years. So it's just gone backward since he's taken over. And shame on our intelligence community for just not seeing this guy coming at all.
Yeah, agreed.
They thought he was going to be even more of a reformer than
well, look, to be fair, so did the CCP. So did most people. They just didn't realize that he was just a Mao Zedong wannabe,
Right.
And it's awful. It's awful what he's done to the country. And it's awful the way the country's going right now. What can you do? You've got this horrible dictator in charge, and the brainwashing that they've been doing with the young kids. Ever since I was there, the brainwashing was very severe, but it's far more severe now.
And they export a chill on the freedom of speech.
Of course they do.
Kids here in college, they'll definitely have a contingent of Chinese national students that will absolutely crack down on any Chinese or white student speaking out against China.
Well, I can give you an example that I went through. I came on a road trip. My first big trip to America, 2016. I bought an old Corvette, and I drove it from coast to coast.
Cool.
And during my trip, I was invited to go and give a speech at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I was invited by the journalism department, okay, because I just finished filming and wrapping the Conquering Southern China documentary, right, where I'd been through Southern China. So I went to go and tell them all about it and show them a trailer for the show and talk about some of the adventures, that kind of thing, and what it's like to film in China and so on, because it was the journalism department. So I turned up to give my presentation, quite a few, college students sitting there, number of Chinese college students sitting there too. Everyone's getting ready. We're about to start. And then the Confucius Institute turns up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had like a middle-aged Chinese woman walks in there with a contingent of very old-looking students. If they weren't students, they were staff members or something from the Confucius Institute, like in their late 20s, early 30s type.
Right. They
walk in there. As soon as they walked in, some of the Chinese students that were in the class actually got up and left.
Mm-hmm. Smart.
Yeah.
You should have joined that.
Yeah, but you see, they have this chilling effect, like you said, that they see the Confucius Institute come in there and they're like, oh, we probably shouldn't be here, And while I was making my speech, they were taking notes. They were trying to counter what I was saying the whole time. I was showing some of the terrible roads that we rode through in Guizhou being, the poorest province in China. Yeah, I'm showing footage on the screen of these terrible roads and just talking about like some of the challenges that you face when you go through rural China. And they interrupted me all the time and said, yes, but this is only a small part of China. China has built all these new highways. China has all these new high-speed rails. I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with my presentation? But they kept trying to counter what I was saying, and they were very angry.
China does have some great modernization and rails and stuff, but for them to pretend like they don't have rural, poor areas anymore is ridiculous.
I know. That's the problem, is they don't want anyone outside of China to know the reality of what's inside of China, right? And so the fact that you've got the bloody Confucius Institutes in U.S. universities still to this day.
Oh, they own Harvard, they own Yale, Stanford especially. Yeah, Columbia, they're right there too. I've had my issues with them in giving a speech.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Berkeley, forget it. There is no free speech.
It's absolutely ridiculous that you have this censorship exported to the universities overseas.
And it's
also
the students.
Hollywood and everything else,
Rally. I know some professors at Berkeley that are very open-minded and still very much so into free speech, but they've got to watch it because, I mean, it's the students that will get you.
Yeah, that's it. Students, they report you to the local Chinese consulate. The local Chinese consulate, they put together some kind of a plan to shut you down. You know?
I have some advice for those students. How about you shut your face and go to class? Why don't you do that? Actually, you're too young to be so cynical. Shut up.
Yeah. No, the problem is that they've been brainwashed, and they are usually the students, they're rewarded, you know, if they rat out a professor who's saying something that's against the Chinese agenda, or if they rat out a student that went to a freedom of speech rally or something, another Chinese student, they get rewarded, you know, and they get told that they're a good Chinese citizen and that they're loyal to the motherland and all that crap. And they eat it up. That's what they want. They want that validation, you know. So unfortunately, being a little narc grass piece of shit coward is a big plus when it comes to Chinese society.
Yeah, well said. I like it.
Snitches get stitches.
Oh, shit.
In China, snitches get badges.
We don't need no stinking badges.
Badges.
Yeah. We don't need no stinking badges.
What's China's view these days on some of their neighbors and their rise economically and even military prowess, like, you know, say Vietnam, which is, as I hear it from a generation or two ahead of me, nobody to screw with. You know, these are determined people. Not that the Chinese aren't, they are as well. How's that relationship there that you've heard of?
I've traveled through Vietnam as well, on motorcycles, as well as China, and seeing the new factories popping up in Vietnam is quite an eye-opener, because I think a lot of companies are sick and tired of dealing with China's shit, to be honest.
Yeah.
You have to make so many concessions in order to operate inside of China. You have to transfer your intellectual property. You have to deal with corruption. You have to deal with bribery. You have to deal with the constant threats of, oh, if you don't do this, you don't do that, then we'll shut you down, or we'll ban you in China, or we'll boycott you, we'll block you, we'll this or that, you know. And then the zero COVID now, where the factories have to shut down and there's nothing you can do about it. A lot of companies, I think, are kind of at the end of their tether, and they're looking elsewhere and moving to places like Vietnam.
That seems to be the number one destination, right? Outside of China.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because Vietnam is right there. It wouldn't be too hard, I guess, to move all your equipment over there or set up over there, or whatever the case. Vietnamese people, if you were to travel into Vietnam, you would not be able to tell the difference between the northern Vietnamese people and the southern Chinese people. They're the same people, actually. You know, genetically they're the same, and they come from the same region, and so they share a lot of things. There's a lot of commonalities there when it comes to traditions and things like that. But China has always seen Vietnam as inferior, and Chinese people, you know, especially the Han people, they're very supremacist, and they see Vietnamese people as lower than them. You see this a lot by the fact that when they insult people, like, for instance, they love to insult some of our, like, they love to insult our wives, you know, myself and Lau 86. And one of the biggest insults they always say is they call Lau 86's wife like a Vietnamese monkey, right? That's like one of their insults. So if you're using that as an insult, it gives you their idea about Vietnamese people, right?
Yeah. So
they see them as inferior. And so the Chinese government is obviously not very happy that a lot of the stuff is being moved over to Vietnam. Don't forget, China did attack Vietnam, actually invaded Vietnam in the 70s, and got their asses kicked, just like everyone else who's tried to invade Vietnam, apparently.
Yeah.
They're not friends. They don't like the Vietnamese, you know?
I don't think the Vietnamese are too fond of them.
No, definitely not. I mean, they come in and they claim their sea and their territory around there, and they block off their rivers so that Vietnam can't get water. I don't think they like China very much.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. I know a lot of investors that are seeking investment in Vietnam right now for this exact same reasons that you put out there. And it's, I mean, you could add political unrest to that, right? And our relationship with them is just not getting better. Whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president now, neither one of those seems to be improving anytime soon, where, you know, Vietnam seems to be a little more capitalist orientated, at least market wise.
I'd say Vietnam, when I traveled through Vietnam, it looked like China when I first got to China. It's got the same vibe. It's got the same, you know, things are opening up. Things are, people are starting to get more wealth. Things are changing. And I can see it. It's got the exact same feeling as when I first got to China.
And from what I understand, there's no bad blood against Americans there.
No, that's something that surprised me a lot. You know, I mean, I'm not American, but I'm traveling with an American, and we never had any issue. People in Vietnam are super friendly and super open and really nice to deal with. Yeah.
My theory is this, that China's going to have their hands full with Russia at a certain point in time, because they're becoming a super indebted nation to China.
Yeah.
I don't know if people remember, but Russia took a nice piece of China at the end of World War II. And if China's looking at a 500-year-old map to decide what part of the sea is theirs, they can look at a 70-year-old map and see that Russia owes them some land. And I think that's going to come to a head at some point. And
well, they're talking about it already, man. Like,
really?
Yeah, they're talking about it already. You're starting to see some netizens, you know, those disgusting netizens that act as attack dogs for the CCP. They're starting to talk about that now. They're starting to, especially with the way Ukraine's pushing Russia back in many areas. Now they're starting to change their tune a little bit about Russia and saying like, oh, well, maybe we should take back what belongs to us. We're starting to see that. What
could Russia do about it at this point? Other than their obvious nuclear weapon, which is their answer to everything.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you know, Xi Jinping just went to Russia, basically very, very much said that, okay, we're standing with Russia now. They've tried to play this middle ground for the longest time, but they've pretty much said now, hey, look, now we're teaming up with you. We're, against the West type thing. That's the vibe that's happening right now.
Well, it's good for the king to go see one of his future vassal states.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also think that you're right on that point. I do think that what's going to happen is Russia's just going to become more and more dependent on China. I mean, China's being a conduit for Russia to sell Russian gas to Europe and stuff like that. China's offered Russia a way out and give them access to their union pay system when SWIFT stopped allowing Russia to use SWIFT. So China's basically doing everything on behalf of Russia and helping Russia out a lot. So Russia's going to owe them a lot of debt. And Xi Jinping's probably going to be like, hey, listen, give us back that land now or else. And they're going to be like, okay, sure.
Well, it's going to be much more than that. That's just part of it. I mean, I think that bill's going to be a lot higher than the piece of land from World War II.
Yeah, that'll be a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't sound good for the Russian people. They're really having a hard time. But who thought? Good for Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Who would have thought after that debacle in 2014? I mean, just little green men with no flags on their arms. And shame on us for not calling that out, by the way, that they would push back so hard. They still have an Air Force.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There is nobody outside of maybe China that would still have an Air Force after a week of going up against the United States. Yeah, I'm convinced of that.
Sure.
Yeah, we have proven it time and time again. That's the first. Your Air Force is toast within 3 days.
It has to be. You got to take it out. Yeah.
And Ukraine's still flying. So that's another thing that might be slowing China down, slowing the roll on Taiwan. You think they look at that and they see the good side of it, that they're getting a more indebted Russia, and the bad side of it is.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that they expected Russia to just take Ukraine in a week or two, just like, that's what Putin was saying. That's what Putin was telling China, telling Xi Jinping when they're making pancakes together and stuff. It's like, hey, look, we're just going to waltz in there and we're just going to take it over and it'll be quick and easy. And Xi Jinping's like, great, we've got you back, Yeah,
well, and then add to that they're going to be welcomed as liberators. By the Ukrainian people and showered with flowers and blah, blah, blah.
Didn't work out that way. But I mean, that's the thing. China has always for the longest time said, we'll just take Taiwan in a day or whatever. We're just going to waltz in there and it's done. Like in a matter of hours, it'll be ours and all that. So they bluster about this all the time. And they start to believe their own bullshit, and they look at Russia and they think Russia can do it as well, because Russia's also talking all this smack all the time about doing this. And then they see Russia fail miserably. It certainly didn't take 2 weeks. It's not done yet. They've lost a lot of troops. There's been a lot of embarrassment. There's been a lot of ridiculous pushback against this around the world, because they weren't expecting that either. They thought they'd just walk in there and the rest of the world will be like, oh, well, it's none of our business, belongs to Russia anyway, or something like that, right?
Obama was a pushover, and he thought that, creaky old Joe was going to be a pushover too. And for whether he knows what's happening or not, somebody behind him is handling this well enough.
Yes, I agree.
So, you've got to give props where props are due.
Agreed. I agree. Anyway, I think that because of what's happened in Ukraine, they are having second thoughts about invading Taiwan. I think they realize it's not as easy as they thought.
What's happening next for you? You've got this wildly crazy, good show and well followed. I mean, congratulations on the 178 million views. That's fantastic. Thanks. You know, how do you do it? How do you keep that going? I mean, how do you keep that viewer engagement? Is it all about China, or are you doing any more variety? Because what I've seen is China.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one, but I started my channel very small, you know, as a kind of a personal set of videos to show people what I was doing in China.
That's okay. I just want people to know I started my show to show how hard it is to work with Carl.
Yeah. No, I mean, I started my videos as a way to allay the fears of many of my friends and family who are like, what are you doing in China? It's so dangerous. It's so crazy. I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually very fun and interesting. And I was showing people what the interesting parts of China were, like what an adventure I was having, you know, what a good time I was having. Because I was having a great time, right? That was the whole focus in the beginning, was to show how cool it was. And people started to watch my videos and ask me questions about like, oh, you're in China. How much does it cost to rent a house? You know, what's it like to date a Chinese woman? So I started to make videos based on all these questions. And I grew a community. And I think that's the most important thing, is to never lose track or lose sight of the fact that you're responsible for a community. You're responsible for providing something for this community. It's not a narcissistic thing where you're like, me, I'm going to show everyone how cool I am and people are going to watch, because that doesn't work out. You know, you don't, unless you're a very sexy woman or something, that kind of thing doesn't really work. You can't be all about like, I'm so cool, watch me, you know?
That's where we're going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You have to offer a service at the end of the day. So you either have to be educating people or helping them in some way. So people have to come to your videos because they want to learn something, because they've got an issue to be solved. Entertainment is also a service, you know? So if you can provide some entertainment, that, you know, is also something people come to see. So it's a mixture of that kind of thing. So I try to make my videos educational. I've got a lot of insight into China, having lived there for so long. One thing I've got that most people don't have is a shit ton of footage that I took.
Yeah.
While I was in China, and I started doing this a number of years back, I decided, you know what, every spare moment I have, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to just film stuff. I'm going to film B-roll. I'll pick a topic. I'm going to film restaurants today. I'll go out and I will actually just go and film like shots of restaurants and people eating and things like that, right? Okay, today I'm going to film public transport, go out and film buses and stuff. So I built this huge library, terabytes of footage while I was there. I'd set my camera down on the road and film like a 10-minute clip, for instance, in an interesting area. So I can use that as a background, or I can use that as, because you'll see interesting things happen that I can use and pick out. I had the foresight, luckily, to film a lot of stuff, and I was very bold with the camera. I don't care. I'll film anything, right? And I filmed a lot. So when I talk about something in China, I always have footage to back it up because it's easy for people to call me a liar. So, for instance, if I say, you know what, it's kind of gross, but a lot of people spit on the streets in China. If I just said that, people be like, you liar, you piece of shit, you're just making this up to make China look bad. But if I have the footage to back it up and I show people spitting on the streets, it's not a lie, is it?
Yeah.
It's true.
It's also part of your social credit score now. It was such a big problem that China made it part of your social credit score. If you're you lose points for like spitting on the street. Isn't that true?
It's true, but that's the thing. There's so many forces out there that are trying to muddy the waters and trying to silence people from telling the truth about China, what it's really like, that I'm a massive target. There's lots of people that they tried to do character assassination against me. They tried to, like I said, interfere with my family and my friends.
What was the character assassination stuff? Was it?
Well, they make videos
racist
to say,
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. There are tons of videos out there trying to say that I'm racist. Yeah. And the reason I'm racist is because I make videos about China.
I don't think I've ever heard you or Matt say anything but really glowing things about the people of China.
Sure. Who
you chose to actually live with and marry a Chinese national. And yet with a straight face, even though your complaints are about their government, and to some extent, and I would agree, our government, that makes you a racist. It's just, it's ridiculous.
It's an easy way to shut people down is through cancel culture. So, someone's saying something valid. They're saying, look, that house is on fire. And someone comes along and says, don't listen to that guy. He's a racist. And everyone's like, oh, bad racist. Hate that guy. Meanwhile, the house burns down. That's just how it is. They go after the person's character rather than their message, because they cannot disprove the fact that the house is on fire. You know?
It's the same thing with freedom of speech. When I started really, my day job is, starting fights with companies who commit fraud. And you'd get these lawyers who would pontificate in court. Freedom of speech is one thing, but you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. And I'm like, well, what if the theater's on fire? Can you yell it then? Because these companies, they were, especially 10 years ago, they were Potemkin villages. Yeah. That's the tact. That really is to shut down the freedom of speech. And really, you saw, that's why you had to leave at a certain point in time. Like it went from, hey, watch what you say to you're going to be in big, big trouble and we're going after your family.
Yeah. And they went after my family in South Africa too. It's ridiculous. They put a campaign together where they found out my parents' business, the phone number. Yeah. And then they looked it up on Google Maps where my parents' business was. I know this all because there was a forum discussing how to do this, right? Okay. And they had photos of my parents on there. They had all the addresses and all that, my parents' phone numbers and email addresses and stuff in documents. And then what they did was they found all the businesses surrounding my parents' area. There was like a barbershop, pizza shop, the usual kind of things. And they actually sent emails to all of these businesses to say that I was a racist and my parents need to get me out of China and what all this other nonsense, and that my parents are racists and all this other weird shit. And so my parents would be going to their local pizza shop or something and they'll be like, listen, what the hell is this? Why are we getting this really badly written thing in English, but bad English about you and your son? Yeah. So they were doing stuff like that, trying to do everything that they could to mess with my life in order to stop me from making videos. I
don't think I'd want to be called a racist in South Africa.
No.
It's too soon. It's just too soon.
I mean, no, the thing is, it's okay. That's just why I can deal with this, is because being a South African, you're automatically labeled as a racist no matter where you go. It's something you have to deal with. So I've been dealing with this since I was, a young boy. Right. And it's something that I'm very used to dealing with. And it's very easy to brush off because, if you're secure in who you are and you're not a racist, someone calls you a racist, it's dumb. It's like if you're a really short person and someone calls you tall, you can say get bent. Right. I mean, obviously not.
I mean, apartheid was pretty much over by the time you were an adult, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, in school. When I was very young. Yeah. Because people think there was this big switch that was switched over in 1994, but it's not really like that. No. It was pre-1994. My primary school, we had already changed, and we had black and white students together and so on. So, from primary school, my parents were very sure to make sure that the schools I went to, preschools and stuff, were mixed race and all that kind of thing,
So they're already integrated.
Completely integrated. My high school was the first high school to ever have integration, even when apartheid was around, So it's just one of those things.
I mean, that's kind of what happened there, right?
Yeah.
The people started integrating and the government just gave up at a certain point. They're just like, they did. We have no mandate anymore from the people, white or black. And he just gave up.
Yeah, exactly. So, it wasn't a thing for me growing up. Apartheid wasn't, even something that I experienced, even though I was still alive during the tail end of it, in the beginnings.
Right.
But by the time I was in high school, that was all said and done. The ANC was in power. Everything's different, Like I said, racism is something that all South Africans are very well aware of, and they know exactly what real racism is, and they know exactly how to deal with racism. And so when people come and accuse you of being a racist, it's like water off a duck's back, really.
Pound sand. Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. There you go. Well, that's cool. I mean, any advice for anybody planning to travel to China? Anybody doing business in China going forward?
Yeah, I'd say don't.
I like it.
I mean,
Do you
it's
have
too
a
much of a
motorcycle
risk.
shop you could sell them?
Yeah, I wish. No, seriously though, I still get people sending me messages to ask me advice on how to go to China and how to find a job there.
They will. I do too. Yeah.
And I'm like, why do you guys not watch my videos? Sure, you could still figure it out if you really had to, but the chances of you being caught up in a lockdown for months on end or whatever, the rise in xenophobia right now towards foreigners, it's really just not the place you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, are there any attacks on foreigners in China that we're not hearing about? Yeah, do you show?
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't seen that on your videos. Do you have some videos of that too on your channel?
I mean, here's the thing: it's more. It's less about people just like mobbing and beating people up. It's more about massive amounts of discrimination. I got a mate in Shanghai who was on the subway and someone called him a foreign virus, right? And jabbed him in his ribs with an umbrella. Actually fractured one of his ribs and bruised a whole bunch of stuff. It was pretty bad. That kind of thing. Just jabbed him with the umbrella, walked off, that type of thing. There's a lot of resentment. People kind of being ratted out by their neighbors saying, oh, there's a foreigner here, so he must have COVID.
Becoming more and more like New York City.
Yeah. It's just a very uncomfortable situation. And I personally feel that if it continues the way it's going right now, it's just a matter of time before we start to see like lynchings basically happen. You know,
Wow.
It's really starting to get to that point. And if it doesn't calm down, because the rhetoric that comes out of the government is all about how foreigners are to blame for every problem in China. It's always foreigners. Foreigners are the ones who brought COVID to China. Everyone believes that now, believe it or not.
No.
Foreigners are the reason why everything sucks in China. So people internalize that. And the last thing you want is a mob getting together and seeing a foreigner there. Maybe a foreigner does something, is drunk and does a stupid thing on the street or something. And then everyone's like, okay, now it's time to teach this foreigner a lesson. And then by the
Which
time...
is what foreigners did in China for years.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Stupid stuff, drunk. And it was tolerated, right? Because
Of course.
you were a foreigner. You couldn't really get away with as much if you were a national
Yeah,
as you
that's
could when
very
you were
true.
and you think that's changing now.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow,
No,
wow.
the attitudes towards foreigners has changed a lot, which in some ways is a positive thing. Like I said, like I do not condone those moron foreigners who just go around like doing stupid shit all over China, drunk and messing around and, you know, breaking the law and stuff like that, because they used to get away with that. But at the same time, it's getting dangerous to the point where just being a foreigner sitting in a restaurant somewhere could get you into trouble.
Bad news. Well,
Yeah.
we didn't even have a chance to talk about Hong Kong, but I guess it's much like everything else. It's now China. It's a fait complete for them. It's interesting because now they're going to allow audit inspections, but you have to do it in Hong Kong for based U.S. listed companies. And I'm just like, I mean, there's going to be no audit performed that isn't spied on by the government, which is why they're saying you can only do it in Hong Kong. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Where can people see you and find your channel? It's Serpent Z, but I would call it Serpent ZA because that's what
Aluminium.
that's how you're found, right?
Yeah.
You actually have a separate channel from Lawway as well. You guys do the same one, and you have some stuff you do separately. Because it sounds like to me that you'd already planned on being like a producer of some kind while you went to China and started filming.
It's weird, man. Like we used to do our own separate channels, Serpent ZA, Lao 86. Those are our main personal channels, but we started to work together and we found out that it works better when we work together. So we've got a new thing called The China Show. I mean, I say it's new. We just rebranded it from ADV Podcasts, but it's called The China Show, which is a weekly live show all about China where we talk about the latest news that's happening in China. We show interesting video clips and so on. I mean, it is also an audio podcast, but it's mainly a video live show. So
I did that with you guys, right? About 6 months ago.
Yeah, we put you on there.
That's I know you guys will take anybody. You have very low standards.
Yeah, the China Show. We're loving that. That's kind of our future projection. We like to focus on that, even though we've got our own personal channels and we've dabbled and done other stuff too. But our main thing these days is the China Show.
I've seen about 20 of your videos and your shows. I didn't see any over the summer because, I was doing other things over the summer. I'll get back to it because I loved what I saw. You guys are really doing a great job. And I love that you still have so much material you can still present, that it's all going to be, some new stuff. And quite frankly, I haven't seen too many other channels that really got up close and personal and showed videos of people being welded into their homes during COVID, or the makeshift little jails they're thrown in that they're calling a hospital or quarantine. And you actually show that.
Yeah, we do.
Kudos to you guys. You do a great job. Where else can we find you? You guys prolific on Twitter or anywhere else?
You can find me on Twitter as well, but absolute best place to find us, to be honest, is on YouTube through The China Show or Serpent ZA and Lao 86.
Great, Winston. Loved having you on. Hopefully, when things change in China, for the better or worse, you can return as a returning champion, because there aren't too many people I speak to that know as much as you or Matt at Lao 86, and look forward to still being a fan and watching your show.
Thank you so much. It was really nice being on the show today, and stay awesome, mate.
All right, you too, man.
If you hear him howling around your kitchen door, you better not let him